The wardrobe smelled of cedar and mothballs, and Zara Grayson pressed herself against the back panel so hard she thought the wood might splinter beneath her shoulder blades. Her phone was dead. Her apartment was 3 miles away, and Marcus, the man who'd followed her for 6 months, who'd left notes in her mailbox, who'd somehow known every coffee shop she visited, every route she walked, had finally cornered her tonight outside the club where she worked as a bartender. She'd run. Stupid, maybe, to run into the old district where half the building stood empty and condemned, where streetlights flickered like dying stars. But Marcus had grabbed her wrist in the alley behind the club, his fingers digging in with bruising force, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered that she couldn't keep ignoring him, that they were meant to be together, that he'd make her understand. Zara had stomped on his instep with her heel and bolted. She'd lost him somewhere between the warehouse district and this crumbling mansion that loomed at the end of a dead-end street, its iron gates hanging crooked, its windows dark as empty eye sockets. The front door had been unlocked, or rather, the lock had been broken long ago, and she'd slipped inside, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The mansion was a cathedral of shadows and dust. Grand staircases swept upward into darkness, chandeliers hung like frozen tears from vaulted ceilings, and the furniture, what remained of it, sat shrouded in white sheets like ghosts waiting for morning. She'd heard the front door creak open behind her, heard Marcus calling her name, his voice echoing through the empty halls with a lover's tenderness that made her skin crawl. So she'd run up the stairs, down a corridor lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her, and into what must have once been a bedroom. The wardrobe stood against the far wall, massive and ornate, its dark wood carved with intricate patterns that might have been roses or might have been something else entirely. She'd climbed inside and pulled the doors shut. Now she waited in the darkness, her hands clamped over her mouth to muffle her breathing, her legs trembling so badly she had to lock her knees to stay upright. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Zara. Marcus's voice drifted through the door, sing-song and patient. I know you're here. I saw you come into this house. There's nowhere else to go. She squeezed her eyes shut, prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. The footsteps moved past the bedroom, continued down the hall. Zara didn't move, didn't dare. She'd wait until dawn if she had to. Wait until the sun rose and she could see clearly enough to find another way out, to run back to the main streets where there would be people, witnesses, safety. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt liquid in the darkness. Her legs began to ache. Her back screamed in protest, but she didn't move. And then she heard it, a sound from somewhere deeper in the house, not footsteps, something else. A crash, followed by a shout, Marcus's voice, but higher now, afraid. Then silence. Zara's heart climbed into her throat. She pressed her ear against the crack between the wardrobe doors, listening. Nothing. More nothing. The quality of silence that comes after something terrible has happened. She should stay hidden, should wait for dawn like she'd planned. But what if Marcus was hurt? What if something in this decrepit house had collapsed on him, or he'd fallen through rotten floorboards? He was a stalker, yes, had terrified her for months, but she didn't want him dead. Zara's hand moved to the wardrobe door before she could talk herself out of it. She pushed it open slowly, wincing at every tiny creak of the hinges. The bedroom was lighter now. Not bright, but the darkness had thinned to a pre-dawn gray that filtered through the tall windows. She could see the shapes of furniture, the outline of the doorway. She crept forward, her muscles stiff from standing motionless for so long. The corridor was empty. The portraits on the walls stared down at her with painted eyes that looked almost alive in the half-light. She followed the corridor back toward the main staircase, her footsteps silent on the dusty floor. And then she saw him. Marcus lay at the bottom of the grand staircase, his body twisted at an angle that made her stomach lurch. His eyes were open, but unseeing. His neck was bent wrong. But that wasn't what made Zara's breath catch in her throat. It was the man standing over him. Tall, taller than anyone she'd ever seen. His hair fell past his shoulders in a cascade of white, so pure it seemed to glow in the dimness. His skin was the color of fresh snow, luminous and bloodless. He wore dark clothing that looked expensive and old-fashioned, a long coat that swept nearly to his boots, and when he turned to look at her, his eyes were the color of winter ice shot through with veins of silver. Beautiful. He was so beautiful it hurt to look at him, and terrifying, because his mouth was stained red, and his teeth, when his lips parted in something that wasn't quite a smile, were sharp. "You're the mouse," he said. His voice was like velvet dragged over gravel, accented in a way she couldn't place. European, maybe. Old world. Zara couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs had turned to stone. The creature took a step toward her, then another. His movements were liquid, predatory, impossibly graceful. "I heard you," he continued, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that felt physical. "Hiding in my wardrobe, trembling like a caught thing." "Your wardrobe?" The words came out as a whisper. "My house." He gestured around them with one pale hand. "My sanctuary. Abandoned to the mortal world above, but mine nonetheless." Zara's gaze flickered to Marcus's body. "Did you kill him? He was hunting you." Not a question. The creature moved closer still, and now she could see the fine details of his face, the sharp cheekbones, the aristocratic nose, the full mouth that should have looked soft but instead looked cruel. "I don't permit hunting in my territory, not by mortals who don't understand the rules." "What are you?" His smile widened, showing more of those terrible teeth. "I think you know." She did. God help her, she did. "Vampire," Zara breathed, among other titles. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see he cast no shadow in the growing light from the windows. "I am Casimir Draculesht, the vampire king of the Eastern Americas, and you, little mouse, have made your nest in a very dangerous place." The world tilted. Zara grabbed for the banister to steady herself. Vampires, vampire kings. This couldn't be real. Except Marcus was dead at the bottom of the stairs with his neck broken, and the creature in front of her had blood on his mouth, and the sun was rising outside, which meant, "The sun," she gasped. "You need to hide. It's almost dawn." Casimir's expression shifted, something flickering across his features that might have been surprise. Concern for a monster? How curious. "I don't want anyone else to die." "Anyone else?" His head tilted, a gesture that was too fluid, too snake-like to be human. "Do you mourn your stalker, then?" "No, yes, I don't know." Zara pressed her hands to her face, trying to make sense of anything. He was sick, obsessed, but he was still a person. And I'm not? She looked up at him, met those impossible silver-veined eyes. "I don't know what you are." Casimir studied her for a long moment. Then, abruptly, he turned and walked toward a door beneath the staircase. "Come. Dawn approaches, and while I have no love for sunlight, I have no desire to burn before we've finished our conversation." Zara didn't move. "You're not going to kill me?" He paused in the doorway, glancing back over his shoulder. "If I wanted you dead, little mouse, you would have died the moment you entered my home. Now come. Or stay and try to explain the body to the mortal authorities. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice at all. Zara stepped over Marcus's body, tried not to look at his empty eyes, and followed the vampire king into the darkness beneath his mansion. The passage led down, down, down. Stone walls replaced plaster and wood. The air grew cold enough that Zara could see her breath misting in front of her face. Electric lights flickered on as they descended, weak bulbs that barely pushed back the shadows. "You have electricity," she said, just to fill the silence. "I have many things." Casimir's voice drifted back to her, "including patience, but dawn waits for no one, not even kings." They emerged into a vast underground chamber that stole what little breath Zara had left. It was a palace, a court. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, carved with intricate reliefs of battles and feasts. Tapestries hung from the walls, their colors rich despite the obvious age. Furniture that belonged in museums filled the space chairs upholstered in crimson velvet, tables of dark wood inlaid with gold, candelabras that held dozens of white candles currently unlit. And at the far end of the chamber, on a raised dais, sat 2 thrones. "Welcome," Casimir said, spreading his arms wide, "to the Court of Shadows, the true heart of my domain." Zara turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "How long has this been here?" "Since before your country was born. We arrived with the European settlers, claim the land beneath their feet while they squabbled over the land above. He moved to a side table and poured deep red liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass, lifted it to his lips and drank. Blood. Had to be blood. Zara's stomach twisted. Casimir lowered the glass and studied her over its rim. You're not screaming, not trying to run. Why? Would it matter if I did? No, but humans usually try anyway. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold it was down here, how little her thin jacket and work clothes protected her. I'm too tired to run anymore. I've been running for months, from Marcus, from my past, from everything. Her laugh came out bitter. At least if you kill me, it's over. I have no intention of killing you. Casimir set down his glass and moved toward her with that same liquid grace. But I'm curious. What were you running from before the Stalker? What past haunts you? That's none of your business. Perhaps, but you're in my home, little mouse. Humor me. Zara met his gaze and found she couldn't look away. His eyes were hypnotic, pulling at something deep inside her skull. My family, she heard herself say. I ran from my family. My father wanted me to marry a man twice my age who owned a chain of car dealerships, said it would secure our future, keep the family business afloat. I said no. He said I was selfish, ungrateful. So I left. Moved across the country, changed my name well, kept my first name but took my mother's maiden name instead of his. Started over. And the Stalker? Met him at the bar where I worked. Seemed nice at first, asked me out. I said no politely. He asked again. And again. And then he started showing up everywhere. My gym, my grocery store, outside my apartment, left flowers, letters, got more insistent. She shuddered. Tonight he said he was done waiting, that I was his, whether I accepted it or not. Casimir's expression darkened, something ancient and terrible moving behind his eyes. And now he's dead. Because of you. Because he violated the laws of my territory. Humans may live above, may carry on their small dramas and petty cruelties, but this district, this forgotten corner of your city belongs to me and mine. We have rules here. No hunting of the unwilling, no taking what hasn't been freely offered. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Your Stalker took something from you. Your peace, your safety, your freedom to walk the streets without fear. That's a kind of theft we do not tolerate. Zara stared at him. You killed him for breaking vampire laws? I killed him for hunting in my territory without permission. The fact that you were his prey is incidental. But it didn't feel incidental. Not with the way Casimir was looking at her now, his gaze intense and searching, as though he was trying to read something written in a language he'd forgotten. What happens now? She asked. Do I just leave? Go back to my life and pretend none of this happened? Can you? Can I what? Pretend. He moved closer and Zara's back hit the cold stone wall. She hadn't realized she'd been retreating. Can you go back to pouring drinks and walking home in the dark and pretending you don't know that monsters are real? That we exist in the spaces between your streetlights, in the shadows of your cities, drinking blood and living by laws older than your civilization? I don't know, she admitted. Neither do I. His hand came up and she flinched, but he only brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers ice cold against her skin. You are a problem, little mouse. I won't tell anyone, I swear. Who would believe me anyway? That's not the problem. His hand lingered near her cheek, not quite touching. The problem is that you came here, to my sanctuary, and you hid in my wardrobe like something out of a fairy tale. The problem is that I found you trembling at dawn, prey seeking shelter from a predator in the den of a greater predator. The problem is that I should have drained you the moment I sensed your heartbeat, should have killed you and dumped your body beside your stalkers, should have erased this complication before it began. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. Why didn't you? Because, Casimir said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. I haven't been curious about anything in 300 years, and you, Zara Grayson, make me curious. He knew her name. How did he know her name? I heard him calling for you, Casimir answered her unspoken question. Your Stalker. He sang your name through my house like a prayer. Zara, Zara, Zara. It echoed in my dreams. You sleep? A slight smile. I rest. Dream sometimes. We're not so different from you in some ways. You drink blood. And you eat meat. We're all predators, little mouse. Some of us are simply more honest about it. Zara couldn't argue with that. Didn't want to. She was exhausted, terrified, and somehow electrified all at once. Standing this close to Casimir felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, thrilling and dangerous, and probably stupid. I need to go, she said. People will wonder where I am. My roommate will worry. The sun is up. The body is in my foyer. And you have no explanation that won't sound like madness. Casimir stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Stay. Sleep. I have rooms prepared for guests, though I rarely use them. When night falls, we'll discuss what to do about your situation. My situation. You witnessed a vampire kill a human. You know about this court, this sanctuary. You're a liability, Zara. I can't simply let you walk free. Fear spiked through her. I thought you said you weren't going to kill me. I'm not, but you're going to stay here as my guest until I decide what to do with you. His tone brooked no argument. If you try to leave during the day, you'll walk into a crime scene. The mortal police will have questions. If you try to leave at night, my guards will stop you. Guards? There are others? Did you think I lived alone in this sprawling domain? Casimir waved a hand, and figures emerged from the shadows at the edges of the chamber. 3 of them, all pale-skinned and white-haired, all watching her with eyes that gleamed like colored glass in the dim light. My court is small but loyal. They will ensure you remain comfortable and contained. One of the figures stepped forward. A woman, shorter than Casimir but no less imposing, her white hair cropped close to her skull, her eyes a startling shade of amber. My lord, you wish us to guard a human. I wish you to host a guest, Serafina. Casimir's voice took on an edge that made even Zara shiver. Ensure she has everything she needs, food, water, comfortable quarters. She is not to be harmed. Is that clear? Serafina bowed low, though her expression suggested she had opinions about this decision. As you command. Casimir turned back to Zara. Go with her. Rest. We'll speak again when night falls. And if I refuse, then I'll carry you to your room myself, and you'll wake up there anyway. Choice is an illusion. Little mouse. But I prefer to let you cling to it. There was nothing to do but follow Serafina deeper into the underground court, through corridors lined with more tapestries and paintings, past rooms that held libraries and armories, and what looked like a throne room fit for a medieval king. Finally, Serafina stopped before a heavy wooden door, pushed it open to reveal a bedroom that could have been lifted from a Gothic novel, 4-poster bed with heavy velvet curtains, wardrobe carved with the same rose-like patterns as the one upstairs, a vanity with an ancient mirror, and thick carpets that muffled every footstep. The bathroom is through there, Serafina said, gesturing to another door. You'll find clothing in the wardrobe. It may not be modern, but it will fit. There's a bell pull by the bed if you need anything. How long am I staying here? Serafina's amber eyes studied her with something between pity and disdain. As long as the king wishes. I'd suggest you make yourself comfortable. Then she left, closing the door behind her. Zara heard the distinct sound of a lock clicking into place. She was a prisoner. Zara sank onto the edge of the bed and dropped her face into her hands. This couldn't be real. Any moment now she'd wake up in her apartment, late for her shift at the bar, Marcus's latest letter sitting on her doorstep like a poisonous flower. But the cold air on her skin was real. The ache in her legs from standing in the wardrobe was real. And the memory of Casimir's ice-cold fingers brushing her cheek was very, very real. She was trapped in an underground vampire court with a creature who called himself a king. And part of her, a small, reckless part she didn't want to acknowledge, found him fascinating. Zara stripped off her jacket and shoes, climbed under the heavy covers, and tried to sleep. She woke to darkness and the sound of someone moving in her room. Zara shot upright, her heart in her throat, her hands scrabbling for anything to use as a weapon. "Peace," came a voice from near the wardrobe. Not Casimir, someone else. "I've brought you food." A lamp flickered on, revealing a young man with the same snow-white skin and hair as the others, though his eyes were a softer blue. He held a tray laden with covered dishes. "Who are you?" Zara demanded. Nikolai. I serve the court." He set the tray on a small table near the window. Not that there was anything to see through that window. but more stone. The king requested you be fed. I wasn't sure what humans eat, so I brought options. He lifted the covers to reveal bread, cheese, fruit, and what looked like roasted chicken. Her stomach growled despite her fear. "Thank you," she said cautiously. Nikolai nodded and moved toward the door, paused. "You should know, the king doesn't usually let humans into the court. The fact that you're still alive is unprecedented. Should that make me feel better or worse?" A slight smile touched his lips. "I haven't decided yet." Then he was gone, and Zara was alone with the food and her spiraling thoughts. She ate because she needed strength, needed to think clearly. The food was good, better than good, honestly, rich and flavorful in a way that suggested it hadn't come from a grocery store. When she finished, she tried the door, or locked, as expected. The bathroom yielded no escape routes, just a massive claw foot tub and marble fixtures that looked antique and probably were. She was well and truly trapped. Zara paced the room for what felt like hours, her mind racing. She needed a plan. Needed to figure out how to convince Casimir to let her go, or how to escape. Or the door opened. Casimir stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor's dim lights, looking like something out of a dark fairy tale. He'd changed clothes, or maybe he hadn't. Maybe vampire clothing just always looked perfect, and his white hair fell around his shoulders like a winter waterfall. "You're awake," he observed. "Hard to sleep when you're a prisoner." "Guest? Is there a difference?" Casimir stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Come, walk with me. I'll show you the court." "Why?" "Because I'm curious about how you'll react. Because you're the first human to set foot here in decades. Because I'm bored and you're interesting." He offered his hand. "Choose your reason." Zara looked at his pale palm, wondered if his skin would be as cold as it had been when he touched her face. She took his hand. Ice cold, marble smooth, strong enough that she could feel the leashed power in his grip. He led her through the corridors, pointing out rooms and their purposes with the casual pride of someone showing off a beloved home. Here was the library, its shelves packed with books in dozens of languages. Here was the armory, where weapons from centuries past hung on the walls. Here was the gallery, where paintings depicted battles and feasts in courts long since turned to dust. "How old are you?" Zara asked as they stood before a painting of a grand hall filled with pale figures in elaborate clothing. 372 years. I was made in the winter of 1654 in a castle in the Carpathian Mountains. My maker was a lord who'd ruled the night for 1,000 years before me. He taught me the old ways, the laws, the codes of honor that separate us from mindless beasts. Where is he now? Dead. Executed by the Council of Elders for breaking the first law. Which is, Casimir's expression went cold, never create a vampire without the Council's approval. Never turn a human without ensuring they understand what they're becoming. Never spread the curse carelessly. His hand tightened around hers. My maker fell in love with a human woman, turned her without asking permission, without preparing her for the transition. She went mad, killed an entire village before the elders tracked her down and put her out of her misery. They executed my maker as punishment. That's horrible. That's justice. Casimir pulled her forward, through another doorway into what looked like a throne room. The two chairs she'd seen earlier sat on the dais, one larger than the other. We are predators, Zara. Monsters. The only thing that keeps us from being animals is our adherence to laws, rules, honor. Without those structures, we're nothing but killing machines. Zara stared at the thrones. You're a king. What do you rule? Every vampire in the Eastern Americas answers to me, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. We are organized into courts, each with their own territories, but all swear fealty to me. I enforce the laws, settle disputes, protect our kind from discovery. How many vampires are there? In my territory, perhaps 2,000. Worldwide, tens of thousands, maybe more. We're not as numerous as humans, but we're not as rare as you'd think. 2,000 vampires, all hiding in the shadows, drinking blood, living by ancient laws. Zara's head spun. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Casimir turned to face her, his silver-veined eyes intense. Because you asked. Because you're curious instead of hysterical. Because—" He stopped, looked away. "Because I don't know what to do with you, Zara Grayson. You're a complication I never anticipated." "Then let me go. I'll disappear. Change my name again. Move to another city. You'll never see me again." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because now that I've met you, the thought of letting you walk away feels impossible." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I've lived for centuries, seen empires rise and fall, loved and lost and learned not to care. And then you stumbled into my house trembling in my wardrobe, and something in me woke up, something I thought had died long ago." Zara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're dangerous, little mouse, more dangerous than you know." Casimir reached out and cupped her face with one cold hand. "I'm saying I should drain you dry and end this before it becomes a problem. But I won't, because for the first time in 300 years, I want something more than blood and power and the endless march of time." "What do you want?" His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a touch so gentle it made her shiver. "I want to know you. I want to understand what makes a human woman run from her stalker into the den of a vampire king. I want to hear your voice and watch your expressions and learn every secret you carry." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to keep you." The words should have terrified her, should have sent her running, screaming, fighting. Instead, Zara found herself leaning into his touch. "You can't keep me," she said softly. I'm not a pet, not a possession. No, you're a mystery, and I've always been drawn to mysteries." Casimir's other hand came up to frame her face, his gaze searching. "Tell me to let you go. Tell me you want to leave. If you do, I'll arrange safe passage back to your life. You'll wake up in your apartment tomorrow night with hazy memories and a conviction that Marcus simply disappeared. I'll make sure of it. And if I don't tell you that, then you stay as my guest, my companion. I'll show you the world beneath the world, the courts and councils, the laws and legends, the truth behind every vampire story you've ever heard. You'll be under my protection, which means no creature mortal or immortal will harm you. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom." His jaw tightened. "You'd be free to roam the court, to learn, to explore, just not to leave. That's not freedom. That's a gilded cage. Perhaps, but it's a cage where you'll be safe, where no stalker can find you, where the dangers of the mortal world can't touch you." His hands slid down to her shoulders. "And maybe in time, you'd choose to stay, not because I'm keeping you, but because you want to be here." Zara's mind raced. This was insane. He was offering her captivity dressed up as protection, imprisonment disguised as sanctuary. But Marcus was dead. Her apartment was probably already being investigated by police. Someone would have found his body by now, would be searching for her. Her roommate would tell them about the stalking, the escalating behavior, the fear. They'd think she'd killed him, or that she'd run. Either way, her old life was over. And here was Casimir, a vampire king who looked at her like she was precious and dangerous all at once, offering her a place in a world she'd never imagined existed. "I need time," she said finally. "To think, to process." Casimir nodded slowly and released her. "You have until tomorrow night. Then I need an answer." He walked her back to her room in silence, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. At her door, he paused. For what it's worth, little mouse, I hope you stay. The court has been too quiet for too long. You make it feel alive again." Then he was gone, and Zara was alone with the weight of an impossible choice. She didn't sleep that day. Couldn't. Her mind spun with everything she'd learned, everything she'd seen. Vampires were real. They lived in courts beneath the cities, drank blood, followed ancient laws. And their king, a 300-year-old creature who should have terrified her, wanted to keep her. The smart choice was to leave. Go back to her life, find a new apartment, move to a different city if necessary. Start over again, like she'd done before. But the thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. When had she last felt safe? Really, truly safe? Not in her father's house, where love came with conditions and price tags. Not in her apartment, where Marcus's letters piled up like death threats. Not walking the streets at night, always looking over her shoulder. But in the underground court, with Casimir's cold hand in hers and his promise of protection, she'd felt safe. Insane. It was insane. She paced the room until her legs ached, then collapsed on the bed and stared at the carved ceiling until her eyes burned. Night fell, or at least she assumed it did. No windows meant no way to track the sun. The door opened. Casimir stood there, his expression carefully neutral. "Have you decided?" Zara sat up slowly, met his ancient eyes. "I'll stay, for now, on one condition." Something flickered across his face. Relief? Triumph? "Name it. You teach me about vampires, about your world, about the laws and the dangers and everything I need to know. I won't be kept ignorant. If I'm going to live here, I need to understand what I'm living with." Casimir's mouth curved into a genuine smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face from cold and regal to devastatingly beautiful. "Agreed. Your education begins tonight." He offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Zara took it. The next week's months passed in a blur of lessons and discoveries. Casimir was a thorough teacher. He explained the hierarchy of vampire society, the elders who made the laws, the kings who enforced them, the courts that maintained order in their territories. He taught her about bloodlines and the different powers certain vampires possessed, about the weakness to sunlight and running water, and the old superstitions that were partly true. "Silver doesn't hurt us," he said one night as they sat in the library surrounded by ancient texts, "but wood through the heart will kill us, as will decapitation. Sunlight burns slowly at first, then faster. A few minutes in direct sun and we're ash. Running water disrupts our ability to move quickly, which is why we avoid crossing rivers if we can help it." "And garlic?" A laugh. "Unpleasant but not deadly. Humans started that rumor because we tend to avoid their kitchens when they're cooking. Crosses? Meaningless. We're cursed, not demonic. God has nothing to do with what we are." Zara absorbed it all, her notebook filling with sketches and notes. Casimir watched her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're taking this remarkably well," he observed. "I'm good at adapting. Had to be, growing up with my father." She glanced up from her notes. "Besides, this is fascinating. Terrifying, but fascinating. Most humans would be catatonic with fear by now. Maybe I'm not most humans." His smile was slow and dangerous. "No, you're definitely not." The court began to accept her presence, though not without reservations. Serafina watched her with constant suspicion, as though waiting for Zara to do something unforgivable. Nikolai, the young vampire who'd brought her food, became something like a friend, or at least, he didn't look at her like she was food. "The king hasn't been this engaged in decades," Nikolai told her one night as he walked her back to her room. "Serafina doesn't trust it. She thinks you're a distraction." "From what?" "From his duties. The court has been restless lately. Rumors of rogues in the Western territories, vampires who don't respect the king's laws. There's talk of challenges to his authority." Zara frowned. "Is he in danger?" "The king is the oldest and strongest vampire in the Americas. He's in no danger. But the court is unsettled, and your presence doesn't help." She thought about that later, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. Casimir was neglecting his duties because of her. The thought should have made her feel guilty. Instead, it made her feel strangely powerful. 2 months after her arrival, she'd started marking days by meals, by the rhythm of activity in the court. Casimir took her to meet his council. The throne room was full of vampires, all pale-skinned and white-haired, all dressed in various styles, spanning centuries. They stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Casimir sat on his throne, and for the first time, Zara saw him not as the man who'd found her trembling in his wardrobe, but as the king he truly was. Power radiated from him like heat. Authority sat on his shoulders like a physical weight. "This is Zara Grayson," he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "She is under my protection. Any who harm her answer to me directly." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. One of them stepped forward, an older-looking vampire with scars crossing his pale face. "My lord, with all respect, why do we harbor a human? It violates protocol." "Protocol serves us, Dragomir, not the other way around." Casimir's tone invited no argument. Zara is here as my guest and companion. That's all you need to know. Companion? Dragomir's eyes narrowed. You haven't taken a companion in centuries, my lord. Why now? Why this human? Casimir's gaze flicked to Zara, something unreadable in his expression. Because she interests me. Is that not reason enough? It risks exposure. What happens when she wants to leave? When she tells others about us? She won't. How can you be certain? Because I trust her. The words rang through the chamber like a declaration. And my trust is not easily given. The council had no answer to that. Later, in the privacy of the library, Zara confronted him. Why did you tell them you trust me? Casimir looked up from the map he'd been studying. Because it's true. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave, you hid in a vampire's wardrobe rather than let your stalker catch you. I know you're adaptable, you've adjusted to life in the court without falling apart. I know you're curious instead of judgmental. And I know, he set down the map and moved toward her. I know that when you look at me, you don't see a monster. You see a person. Zara's breath hitched. You are a person, just not a human one. Most humans wouldn't make that distinction. I'm not most humans. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture familiar now. No, you're exceptional. The space between them felt charged, electric. Zara's heart hammered in her chest. Casimir, she whispered, tell me to stop. His thumb brushed over her lower lip. Tell me this is too much, too fast, too dangerous. Tell me to keep my distance. She should. God, she should. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. His lips were cold but soft, and for a moment, he froze. Then his hands were in her hair, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that stole her breath. When they broke apart, his eyes had gone silver all the way through, glowing in the dim light. Zara, he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. You're playing a dangerous game. Maybe I like danger. A low sound rumbled in his chest, half laugh, half growl. You should fear me. I do, a little. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. But I also trust you. Is that insane? Probably. He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. I'm a vampire, Zara. I've killed more people than you can imagine. I've lived through wars and plagues and the fall of empires. I'm a monster dressed in civilization's clothing. Then why does being near you feel safer than anywhere else I've ever been? Casimir had no answer for that. They stood in the library for a long time, wrapped in each other, the weight of impossible feelings settling between them. Everything changed after that night. Casimir stopped pretending their relationship was simply king and guest. He kept her close, showed her off to visiting vampires from other courts, introduced her as his companion with a possessive pride that should have been alarming. But Zara found she didn't mind. She was falling for him. Had been falling since the night he found her trembling in his wardrobe, since he'd killed her stalker and offered her sanctuary, since he'd looked at her like she was precious instead of prey. It was insane, impossible, a human and a vampire, but her life had never been conventional anyway. 3 months into her stay, Nikolai burst into the library where Zara was studying a text on vampire politics. There's a challenge, he gasped. Dragomir, he's challenged the king's authority. Says Casimir has gone soft, that harboring a human proves he's unfit to rule. Zara's blood went cold. Where's Casimir? The throne room. They're gathering now. She ran. The throne room was packed with vampires, all pressed against the walls, forming a circle around the center of the space. Casimir stood on one side, his expression carved from ice. Dragomir faced him, scarred and snarling. You've broken no laws, Casimir was saying, his voice echoing through the chamber. I've given you no cause for challenge. You've taken a human to your bed, Dragomir spat. You've neglected your duties to play house with prey. The Western territories are in chaos because you're too busy fucking your pet to notice. Casimir's eyes flashed silver. Careful, Dragomir. I've allowed this challenge because our laws demand it, but insult her again and I'll tear out your tongue before we begin. She's made you weak. No. Casimir smiled, cold and terrible. She's made me remember why I wanted to rule in the first place, to protect those weaker than myself, to build something better than the chaos my maker left behind. Your challenge is accepted, Dragomir. Let's see which of us is truly weak. The fight was brutal and fast. Dragomir lunged with vampire speed, but Casimir was faster, their bodies blurred, moving too quickly for Zara's human eyes to fully track. She saw flashes Casimir's hand around Dragomir's throat, Dragomir's claws raking across Casimir's chest, blood, black, not red, she noted distantly, spattering the floor. It ended when Casimir tore Dragomir's head from his shoulders with his bare hands. The body collapsed, turned to ash, scattered across the throne room floor. Casimir stood in the center of the circle, breathing hard, blood staining his torn shirt. His eyes found Zara in the crowd. "Anyone else?" he asked, his voice carrying to every corner. "Anyone else think I've gone soft? Think harboring a human makes me weak? Challenge me now?" Silence. "Good." Casimir wiped the blood from his hands on what remained of his shirt. "Zara Grayson is under my protection. This court is my domain. The Eastern Territories are my responsibility. I have neglected nothing. And if any of you question my authority again, you'll join Dragomir in the afterlife. Is that understood?" A chorus of voices. "Yes, my lord." Casimir's gaze swept the room once more. Then he turned and walked toward Zara, stopped in front of her, cupped her face with his blood-stained hands. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She was shaking. "You killed him. He challenged me. The law demanded resolution. You tore his head off. Would you prefer I'd shown mercy?" Casimir's expression was unreadable. "In my world, mercy is weakness. Dragomir would have killed me if he could, would have killed you to prove his point. I did what had to be done." Zara looked into his ancient eyes and saw the truth there. He would do it again. Would kill anyone who threatened her, who challenged his right to keep her. She should be horrified. Instead, she kissed him. Hard. Desperate, tasting blood and danger and something deeper. Casimir made a surprised sound against her mouth, then kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands tightening in her hair. The assembled court watched in stunned silence. When they broke apart, Casimir rested his forehead against hers. "You're extraordinary, little mouse. And you're terrifying. Does that change how you feel?" "No." She touched his chest, where Dragomir's claws had torn through fabric and skin. The wounds were already healing. "I think I'm falling in love with you, and that's probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done." Casimir's expression transformed. "Zara, I know it's insane. I know you're a vampire, and I'm human, and this can't possibly work long term. But I don't care. These 3 months have been the happiest of my life. You've made me feel safe and valued and seen in a way no one ever has. So yes, I'm falling in love with you. And if that makes me crazy, then I'm crazy." For a long moment, Casimir just stared at her. Then he swept her into his arms and carried her from the throne room, through the corridors to his private chambers, a suite she'd never seen before. He set her down gently in the center of a room, dominated by a massive 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet. "I have lived for 372 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've had lovers, companions, people I cared for in my own cold way, but I have never, not once, loved anyone the way I love you." Zara's breath caught. "You love me?" "Desperately, dangerously, in a way that makes me want to lock you in this room and never let you leave, just so I can be certain you're safe." He crossed to her, cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "You walked into my life trembling in a wardrobe, prey seeking shelter from a predator, and you've turned my entire world upside down. I love you, Zara Grayson, and I will spend the rest of your life proving it, if you'll let me." "The rest of my life," the words caught in her throat. "Casimir, I'm human. I'll age, die. You'll still be here, unchanged. While No," his voice was firm. "That's not how this ends." "What do you mean?" He took her hands in his. "The first law says I can't turn a human without the council's permission, but I'm a king. I have influence. And if you want it, if you truly want to stay with me forever, I'll petition the council. I'll argue your case. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you." Zara's head spun. "You want to turn me? Make me a vampire? Only if that's what you want. I won't force this curse on you. But the thought of watching you age and die while I remain frozen..." His jaw clenched. "I can't bear it. I've only just found you. I'm not ready to lose you. She should be terrified, should refuse. Becoming a vampire meant giving up sunlight, giving up her humanity, giving up everything she'd ever known. But it also meant staying with Casimir, meant an eternity in the court, learning and growing and living in a world humans never imagined existed. I need time to think, she said finally. Casimir nodded, though something in his eyes dimmed. Of course. This isn't a decision to make lightly. But ask me again in a month, after I've had time to really understand what I'd be giving up, what I'd be gaining. She squeezed his hands. I'm not saying no, Casimir. I'm saying I want to be sure. Hope flickered across his face. A month. A month. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. You're the best thing that's happened to me in 3 centuries, little mouse. Whatever you decide, know that. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the weight of an impossible future settling between them. The month passed in a whirlwind. Casimir took her to other courts, introduced her to vampires from across his territory. She met the Council of Elders, ancient vampires who looked barely older than 20, but carried the weight of millennia in their eyes. They questioned her extensively about her understanding of vampire nature, her willingness to join their kind, her relationship with their king. She answered honestly, told them she loved Casimir, that she understood the weight of immortality, that she wasn't making this choice lightly. The elders deliberated, debated, finally agreed to allow her transformation, provided she spent another month preparing, learning the laws in depth, understanding the responsibilities of vampire life, making absolutely certain this was her choice. Zara agreed. She spent her days in the library studying texts on vampire history and law, spent her nights with Casimir, learning what her life would be like after the change. He was patient, answering every question, addressing every fear. Will it hurt? She asked one night as they lay tangled together in his massive bed. Yes. The transformation is agony. Your body has to die to be reborn, but I'll be with you every moment. I won't leave your side. Will I still be me? Yes. You'll be stronger, faster, immortal. Your senses will sharpen. You'll need blood to survive, but your memories, your personality, your soul, those remain unchanged. You'll still be Zara, just a vampire version. And the sun? His arms tightened around her. You'll never see another sunrise, never feel sunlight on your skin. That's the hardest part for most new vampires, the loss of the day. But I'll have eternity with you. Yes. Then it's worth it. The night of her transformation arrived too quickly and not fast enough. The council gathered in the throne room, along with every member of Casimir's court. Zara stood in the center, wearing a gown of deep crimson velvet that Casimir had given her, old-fashioned but beautiful, like something out of a Gothic novel. Casimir stood beside her, regal in dark clothing that made his white hair and pale skin seem to glow. Zara Grayson, the head of the council intoned, her voice echoing through the chamber. You have petitioned to join our kind, to take on the curse of immortality, to leave your human life behind, to embrace the night. Do you do this of your own free will? I do, Zara said clearly. Do you understand what you're giving up? Sunlight, mortality, the warmth of human life? I do. And do you accept the laws of our kind, the codes of honor, the responsibility to protect our secret, the weight of eternity? I accept, the elder nodded. Then by the power granted to this council, I authorize your transformation. Casimir Draculesht, as her maker, the responsibility for her actions falls to you. Train her well, teach her our ways, ensure she becomes a credit to our kind. Casimir bowed. I swear it on my honor. Then proceed. The court emptied, leaving only Casimir and Zara and the weight of what was about to happen. He led her to his chambers, laid her gently on the bed. Last chance to change your mind, he said softly, brushing hair from her face. I'm not changing my mind. Zara reached up and cupped his cheek. I love you, Casimir. I want this. I want forever with you. His eyes glowed silver in the darkness. Then I'll give you forever, little mouse. He bit her neck. The pain was instant and overwhelming, but beneath it ran something else, pleasure, warmth, a sense of connection so profound, it made her gasp. Casimir's venom flooded her system, rewriting her cells, killing her humanity, and replacing it with something ancient and powerful. She felt her heart slow, felt her breathing become labored, felt death creeping through her veins like ice. Casimir pulled back, his mouth stained with her blood. He bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink. You need my blood to complete the change." Zara drank. The taste was strange copper and wine and something indefinable, but as it slid down her throat, strength flooded back into her limbs. Her senses sharpened. She could hear Casimir's heartbeat, slow and steady. Could smell the old stone of the mansion, the ancient books in the library, the blood of every vampire in the court. Then the agony truly began. Her body convulsed. Every cell screamed as it died and was reborn. Fire raced through her veins, followed by ice. Her bones felt like they were breaking and reforming. Her muscles tore and healed and tore again. Through it all, Casimir held her, whispered reassurances in languages she suddenly understood: Latin, Romanian, languages older than English. Stroked her hair and promised it would be over soon, that she was strong enough to survive this. She believed him. Hours passed, or days. Time lost meaning in the pain. And then, suddenly, it was over. Zara opened her eyes and the world was different. Everything was sharper, clearer. She could see in the darkness as though it were lit by floodlights, could hear conversations happening rooms away, could smell emotions on the air: fear, curiosity, love. She sat up slowly, looked at her hands. They were pale now, white as fresh snow, and when she focused, she could see the faint tracery of veins beneath the surface, black instead of blue. "How do you feel?" Casimir asked, his voice soft. Zara turned to him. He looked the same as always, beautiful and dangerous, and hers. But now she could see more. The power that radiated from him, the age in his eyes, the depth of his love written across his immortal face. "I feel," she searched for words, "alive, more alive than I've ever felt." His smile was radiant. "Welcome to immortality, my love." She launched herself at him, and they tumbled across the bed in a tangle of limbs and laughter. He caught her easily, his hands gentle despite his strength. "I need to teach you control," he murmured against her mouth. "You're strong now, faster than humans. You could hurt someone accidentally if you're not careful." "Then teach me." "I will, but first—" He pulled back slightly. "You need to feed. The hunger will be overwhelming until you learn to manage it." As if summoned by his words, Zara became aware of a burning in her throat, a need, primal and consuming, for blood. Casimir saw the understanding dawn in her eyes. "I have stores. Donated blood from willing humans who live in the city above. It's not as satisfying as fresh blood, but it's safer. We only hunt with permission now. The old ways are forbidden." He taught her to feed, taught her to control her strength so she didn't crush everything she touched, taught her to move with vampire speed, to blur from one place to another in the blink of an eye. The court welcomed her officially a week later, in a ceremony that felt both ancient and surprisingly warm. Serafina even offered a grudging smile. "You're one of us now," she said. "That means we protect our own. Welcome to the Court of Shadows, Zara." Zara had never felt more at home. Months turned into years. Zara adapted to vampire life with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. She learned the laws inside and out, studied the history of their kind, trained with Serafina until she could hold her own in a fight, and she loved Casimir with every fiber of her immortal being. They ruled the court together, two figures on the thrones, one ancient and terrible, one young but no less fierce. The territory flourished under their combined leadership. The western territories settled, rogues were brought to justice, order was maintained. But more than that, they were happy. Casimir showed her the world, the parts of it that existed at night anyway. They traveled to other courts, met vampires from around the globe, explored cities that glittered under the stars. "Do you regret it?" he asked one night as they stood on the balcony of a castle in Romania, overlooking mountains that had stood since before recorded history. "Giving up the sun?" Zara leaned into his side, his arm wrapped around her waist. "No, I regret nothing. My human life was spent running and hiding and trying to be someone I wasn't. This life, our life, is everything I never knew I wanted." "Even though you'll never see another sunrise?" She turned to face him, cupping his face between her pale hands. "Casimir, you are my sunrise, my light in the darkness. Why would I miss the sun when I have you? His kiss was sweet and deep and filled with centuries of love. I found you trembling in my wardrobe, he murmured against her lips, a mouse hiding from a predator, and you became my queen, my equal, my everything. And you took a broken human running from her stalker and gave her a home, a family, forever. Zara smiled, her fangs gleaming in the moonlight. I'd say we're even. Not even close. I got the better end of this bargain. So did I. They stood on the balcony until dawn approached, then retreated into the castle to sleep away, the day wrapped in each other's arms. Because that was their life now. Eternal nights filled with love and purpose and the knowledge that they'd found something rare and precious, true partnership, deep understanding, and a love that would last literally forever. Zara had fled her stalker and hidden in a wardrobe, trembling and afraid, and the vampire king had found her and offered her the world. She'd taken it, claimed it, made it hers. And together, they ruled the darkness with grace, power, and a love that defied mortality itself. Years continued to pass, marked now not by aging, but by the slow accumulation of memories and experiences. Zara became known throughout the vampire world as Queen of the Eastern Americas, Casimir's equal in all but age. Her reputation for fairness in disputes, combined with her fierce protection of the vulnerable, made her beloved by many and respected by all. She never forgot her human life, the fear, the running, the desperate night when everything changed. But those memories became distant, like a story told about someone else. The woman who'd tended bar and lived in fear of her stalker felt like a different person entirely. The court threw a celebration on the 10th anniversary of her transformation. Vampires came from across the world to pay their respects to the king and his queen. The throne room was filled with music and laughter and the clink of crystal glasses filled with blood wine. Casimir pulled Zara onto the dance floor, spinning her through steps she'd learned over the past decade. His eyes never left hers. "Happy?" he asked, deliriously. "No regrets?" "Only that we didn't find each other sooner." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I had to wait 300 years for you, little mouse. I think my patience was rewarded." "Little mouse," she repeated with a grin. "I'm a vampire queen, and you still call me that. Because that's how I'll always see you, brave and small and trembling in my wardrobe, seeking shelter in the last place anyone sensible would look." He dipped her dramatically, earning applause from the watching vampires. "You were never really a mouse, though. More like a lion cub, small but fierce." "Flatterer." "Truth-teller." The music swelled. They danced until dawn threatened, then retired to their chambers, leaving the court to celebrate without them. In the privacy of their room, Casimir pulled Zara close. "I love you, in case I haven't mentioned it recently. You mentioned it this morning, and yesterday evening, and approximately 500 times before that." She kissed him softly. "But I never get tired of hearing it." "Good, because I plan to tell you every day for the rest of eternity." "That's a long time." "Not long enough." He traced patterns on her back, his touch gentle despite his strength. "I could spend 10,000 years with you, and it wouldn't be enough." Zara's eyes stung with tears she could no longer cry. Vampires didn't produce tears, she'd learned, but the emotion was there, overwhelming and perfect. "I love you too," she whispered, "my king, my maker, my forever." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the kind of intimacy that came from knowing someone completely. From understanding not just their body, but their soul, their fears, their dreams, their every thought and feeling. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness before dawn, Casimir spoke softly. "Sometimes I think about that night, the night I found you. What would have happened if you'd hidden somewhere else? If I'd ignored the sound of your heartbeat? If I'd simply killed your stalker and left you alone?" "We wouldn't be here," Zara said simply. "Exactly. And that terrifies me. To think how close I came to missing you, to spending the rest of my immortal life not knowing you existed." "But you didn't miss me? Fate, chance, luck, whatever you want to call it, brought us together." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "And now nothing can separate us. Not time, not distance, not death. We have forever, Casimir." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch achingly tender. Forever with you is all I'll ever need." They fell asleep as the sun rose above the mansion, its deadly light held at bay by thick curtains and underground walls. Two vampires, king and queen, predator and predator, locked in an embrace that would last through the centuries. Decades passed, then a century. Zara stopped counting years the way humans did. They became meaningless when you had eternity ahead of you. Instead, she marked time by moments. The night they traveled to Japan and watched a vampire tea ceremony that had been performed the same way for 1,000 years. The evening they spent in Paris, dancing through the catacombs with French vampires who remembered when those tunnels were first dug. The dawn they spent in Australia, racing the sun to reach shelter, laughing breathlessly at their close call. Each moment was precious, each memory a treasure. The court evolved with the changing world. Technology reached even into their underground sanctuary computers and phones, and all the modern conveniences, adapted for vampire use. The old ways remained: the throne room, the formal courts, the blood oaths and ancient laws, but they existed alongside the new. Zara became an expert at navigating both worlds. She maintained contacts in the human world through carefully chosen intermediaries, ensuring that the vampire community stayed informed about changes above ground. She helped establish new protocols for the digital age, ways to keep their existence secret in a world of cameras and social media and constant surveillance. But through it all, Casimir remained her constant, her anchor, her home. They never tired of each other, never fell into the comfortable indifference she'd heard affected some immortal couples. Every night she woke to find him watching her with the same intensity he'd shown that first dawn, and every night her undead heart felt full to bursting with love for him. One evening, as they prepared for a formal court session, Zara caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked exactly as she had the night of her transformation. Young, beautiful, frozen at 25 forever. But her eyes held centuries now, experience and wisdom that no mortal could possess. "Do you miss it?" Casimir asked from behind her. "Your human reflection?" "I miss the person I was becoming," she admitted. "Before Marcus started stalking me, I was finding myself, figuring out who I wanted to be. And then fear took over. And now?" She turned to face him, a smile playing at her lips. "Now I know exactly who I am. Queen, partner, warrior, scholar, yours." She pulled him close. "I'm more myself now than I ever was as a human. You gave me that, the freedom to become who I was meant to be." Casimir's kiss was fierce and claiming. "You gave yourself that, little mouse. I just provided the opportunity. Then we're both responsible." She straightened his collar, her fingers lingering on the dark fabric. "Ready for court? With you beside me? Always." They walked to the throne room together, hand in hand, equals in every way that mattered. The session was routine, settling disputes between vampires from different territories, hearing reports from scouts about rogue activity, discussing strategies for maintaining secrecy in an increasingly connected world. Zara handled half the cases while Casimir observed with obvious pride. When the last petitioner had been heard and the court dismissed, Serafina approached the thrones. "My queen, my lord," she said with a formal bow, "word has come from the council. They wish to visit our court next month. Something about reviewing the progress of our youngest member." Her gaze flicked to Zara. Casimir's expression darkened. "The council approved her transformation. What more do they need to review? They want to ensure she's adapted properly, that she follows the laws, that her transformation was successful." Serafina's tone suggested she found the whole thing unnecessary. Standard procedure for any vampire under 100 years old. "I've been a vampire for over a century," Zara pointed out. "Barely. To the elders, you're still a child." Serafina's mouth quirked. "Don't worry. They'll ask questions, observe you for a few days, and leave satisfied. You're the most law-abiding vampire I've ever met, almost annoyingly so." Zara laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." After Serafina left, Casimir pulled Zara aside. "The council makes me nervous. They have too much power, too much influence. If they decided they disapproved of our relationship, they won't." Zara squeezed his hand. "I've followed every law to the letter. I'm a model vampire. They'll review my progress, see that I'm thriving, and leave. It'll be fine." She was right. The council arrived a month later, 5 ancient vampires whose combined age exceeded 10,000 years. They questioned Zara extensively, tested her knowledge of the laws, observed her interactions with the court and her handling of disputes. At the end of their week-long visit, the head elder, the same one who'd authorized her transformation, called a formal assembly. "Zara Grayson, once human, now vampire," she intoned. "We have reviewed your progress, observed your adaptation, tested your knowledge and your character." A pause, weighted with significance. "You have exceeded all expectations. You are a credit to our kind and to your maker. We declare your transformation an unqualified success." Relief flooded through Zara, followed immediately by irritation. An unqualified success, as though she were a science experiment rather than a person. But Casimir's hand tightened on hers, and when she glanced at him, the naked relief on his face made her throat tighten. He'd been worried, truly worried that the council might find fault, might try to separate them. Later, in the privacy of their chambers, he held her so tightly she could barely breathe, not that she needed to breathe much anymore. "I couldn't lose you," he whispered into her hair. "When they said they were coming, all I could think was, what if they found a reason to take you away? What if they decided I'd turned you improperly, or that you weren't suitable for vampire life? What if they tried to execute you?" They didn't. They approved. Zara pulled back to meet his eyes. "We're safe. We're together. Forever, remember?" "Forever," he echoed, and kissed her like a drowning man finding air. Time continued its endless march. Centuries came and went. The world above changed in ways that would have seemed like magic to Zara's human self-flying cars, space colonies, technology that blurred the line between human and machine. But in the court of shadows, some things remained constant. Love, loyalty, the eternal dance of vampire politics and power. Zara and Casimir ruled together, a partnership so strong that younger vampires spoke of them with reverence. The king and queen of the Eastern Americas, who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built an empire of trust and justice. They never forgot how they'd met. That desperate night when a human woman fled her stalker and hid in a vampire's wardrobe. When a bored, immortal king found someone who made eternity interesting again. On the 200th anniversary of Zara's transformation, the court threw a celebration that lasted for 3 nights. Vampires came from around the world to pay tribute. Stories were told, songs were sung, and at the height of the festivities, Casimir stood before the assembled crowd and spoke. 200 years ago, I found a woman trembling in my wardrobe. She was prey seeking shelter from a predator, finding instead a greater predator who should have killed her without thought. His gaze found Zara in the crowd, and his expression softened. Instead, I found my queen, my equal, the other half of my immortal soul. And every night since, I have thanked whatever force in the universe brought her to me. He extended his hand, and Zara moved through the crowd to take it, let him pull her onto the dais beside him. "Zara," he said softly, so only she could hear, "you saved me. Not from danger or death, but from the slow death of boredom and cynicism that comes from too many centuries alone. You reminded me what it means to love, to hope, to live rather than simply exist." Tears she couldn't cry burned behind her eyes. "And you gave me everything, safety, purpose, a home, forever, with someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he finds." "Always," Casimir promised. "For all eternity, little mouse. You're mine and I'm yours." "Forever," Zara agreed. They kissed before the entire court, a declaration of love that had lasted 2 centuries and would last 2,000 more. The celebration continued around them, but in that moment, there was only the two of them, king and queen, maker and creation, predator and predator, partners in every sense of the word. Zara had fled her stalker and hidden in a wardrobe, trembling at dawn. The vampire king had found her and offered her eternity. She'd accepted, and in doing so, had found not just safety or shelter, but the kind of deep, abiding love that most people, human or vampire, only dreamed of. It was a love born in darkness, forged in blood, and tempered by centuries of partnership. A love that defied logic and mortality and every expectation. But it was real, true, eternal. And as Zara stood beside Casimir, her hand in his, surrounded by their court and their people, She knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice that night so long ago. She'd run into the darkness seeking safety, and she'd found home. The years stretched ahead of them, countless and limitless, each one a gift. They would face challenges. Certainly vampire politics were never simple, and the world continued to change in ways that required constant adaptation. But they would face everything together, as they had from the beginning, because Zara was no longer the trembling woman hiding in a wardrobe. She was a queen, powerful and confident, and loved beyond measure. And Casimir was no longer a bored immortal king killing time until the end of the world. He was a partner, a lover, a being who'd found purpose and joy in sharing his existence with someone who matched him in every way. They were forever. And forever, it turned out, was just long enough.